Thank you for joining us today, roundtable discussion on ESG, unlocking the potential to sustainable future. My name is Sergio Mendoza. I am the Vice President at Peruvian Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I will be facilitating our conversation this afternoon. So this roundtable brings together true leaders and specialists to share insights, strategies, and best practices for integrated ESG principles into our operations and strategies. By the end of this hour, we aim to leave with actionable takeaways for driving sustainability in our respective organization. Before we dive into the agenda, I will let our speakers to introduce themselves and share a bit of its background. I will start with our distinguished senator, Rosa Galvez.
Hello everybody. Hello from Madrid. I am 6 hours ahead of you, so I'm close to midnight. Very happy to talk to the Peruvian community and especially about this topic. So I'm I'm an engineer, but I was born in Peru, came very early to Canada, did master's and PhD at McGill, and started a career in science, environmental science, environmental engineering. And since 2016, I'm an independent senator at the Canadian Parliament. Very happy to be exchanging with you.
Thank you. Eduardo, with you?
Thanks, Sergio. And nice to meet you all. Eduardo Tortua, working for Deloitte in the sustainability and climate change practice, and mainly supporting companies in all Latin America, but mainly focus in Colombia and Peru, helping these companies advance their ESG practice. So really happy to have the opportunity to be here today and also to share some of our experience, precisely helping companies working on their ESG roadmap.
Thank you. Well, Murray, it seems like he got disconnected. Also with us is Sandra Barreto. She's the president at PCCC. Sandra?
Thank you, Sergio. Well, as Sergio said, I immigrated to Canada 20 years ago. As a professional, I'm an accountant and a business administrator, specialized in business process, accounting, and startup. I also have in the Chamber of Commerce, I'm in charge of the agri-industry because I'm an entrepreneur in trade. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's continue. So
sorry about all that. Something's wrong here, but I'm connected finally.
All right, that's good. So could you please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background with us?
Yeah, okay. I can't see anybody else but you, Sergio, but that's fine. I'll talk to you. Hi to everybody. My name is Murray Jones. I'm a Canadian. I'm based variously in Ontario and Alberta, where I do my work. I'm a consultant during these days. I started my career many years ago in the environmental field, I graduated from university in Master's Environmental Studies. I worked for governments in Canada and the Netherlands on particularly environmental impact assessment. I've worked for Big Oil, Shell International for 25 years on a number of projects, also introducing new systems to the company. Back in the days of the 1990s, it was environment. Then it became social and health as well. Then it became sustainable development and so forth. So I've worked in those fields, trying to promote those areas, particularly two major projects with Shell, one in Peru and one in Canada, but also globally through the Shell International Office. And more recently, the past decade or so, I've been consulting directly with various companies, usually resource-based companies, but particularly, and more recently, some renewable companies as well. Always with a focus on environment and social as the key areas of my work.
Right. Thank you, Murray. Well, in the scene, let's take a quick overview about what ESG stands for. So let's begin. All right. Could you please start by guiding us through ESG and why it's more critical than ever businesses and organizations to prioritize it?
Yeah. Do you have my slides, Sergio?
No. You could continue. You are. We will continue talking this and this way.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background to ESG and some of the issues I see there. Particularly, ESG comes across as a term that's used for sort of socially sustainable investment, and it's got a context around it that deals with investment at issues, particularly, and how companies should be reporting and talking about environment, social, and governance issues. I'm going to talk about a slightly different angle than strictly the investment idea and what is needed for good investment. But I see ESG as a fundamental for business under any conditions. So as people know, ESG is there's three pillars to that, of course: environmental, social, and the governance. And under the sort of the new formal systems, companies are expected to report. There's a demand for more socially and sustainable, environmentally sustainable investments. And the goal of ESG is typically to capture all the non-financial risks and opportunities inherent in a company's day-to-day activities. To say ESG is somewhat controversial. It's seen by some that companies should have a fiduciary responsibility to act and perform simply on the value of the shareholders. And it's seen by others as something that's more sustainable and socially responsible. This began back in 2002, which is an initiative of the United Nations. It's a term that came to people's attention. But the terms dealing with sort of the whole ESG, there's a whole range of terms that I'm sure many of our participants, or all of our participants, are sure of, that talked, first of all, individually about the different sectors of I'll say the environment, the air, land, and water, nature, biodiversity, and then on the social side, talking about our neighbors, Indigenous people, vulnerable peoples, our surrounding communities, health, and some of the tools that relate to those, which are such as environmental impact assessment, health impact assessment, and how you manage those internally in companies, which are through various management systems, which I now refer to sort of as the 8 SES, health, safety, environment, and social, are the sort of the management systems that I work on internally as a governance factor for how the companies actually make these things happen. Some of the terms that people will be familiar with in the past or recent past, because they're still used today, are corporate social responsibility, the triple bottom line, sustainable development, responsible investing, and so on. So in a broad context, ESG is not new. It's not really new. It's just been a way of kind of reformulating for people, for companies, as to how this thing should work. And sometimes I'll say now it's typically called ESG, and it's been used from this external point of view of investment, but I still I just use the term ESG now the way I've been using in the past, things like sustainable development or CSR or whatever, and trying to do the same things that I work with when I work with companies to support the notion that you have to embed in your business. You have to be responsible for the environmental side of things, the social side of things, and of course, how you actually manage those inside the business. From a definitional point of view, environment can range from greenhouse gas emissions to water, raw material usage, waste management, biodiversity loss. But it's basically about managing, reducing, or avoiding impacts from the environmental point of view. On the social side, internally, it can include company diversity, human rights, animal rights, information related to labor practices and the company supply chain. From the social side, it also has to do with the impact the organization has on people, including staff, customers, and the community. The government, so forth, is how the company is organized to actually address various issues from bribery and corruption right through to HSE management.
Your perspective, what could be the major trend drives shape the GLA today?
Sorry, Sergio, you're not coming through very clearly to me.
No, say again, as given that you have such a great experience, and could you please tell us what could be major trends and drivers shaping the ESG landscape today?
The major trend?
Yeah, major trends and drivers.
Well, from my point of view, the driver is good business. It doesn't have to be through social, what we call socially responsible investment. It does not have to come through the investment houses. The driver should be what the companies themselves want to do and what they actually believe in. What I look for is that companies have the sense that it's good for business. It's good for reputation. It's good for how you work locally. So how that should actually drive the company. One of the trends that I could speak about a little bit is around stakeholder engagement and how to improve and move more in that particular direction. Because I see that engagement with the various companies I've worked with varies dramatically. I mean, you can't say in this day and age, we now all know about what is stakeholder engagement, and we all should be doing it, and we all should be doing it well, because I've seen even today a huge variation. And even though there are instances, 2 decades ago where such things were done very well, the learning curve is very low sometimes as to what the companies are actually implementing.
All right, thank you, Murray. Well, now let's jump into the mental factors as later can be a blood for proactive environmental policies. Could you please share some key climate change initiatives that business can align and with to reduce their impact, and also if you can share what practical steps or the strategy business take to lower their carbon footprint, and if there's any success stories to illustrate how efforts paid off in the long run.
Sure. So first, let's start with why we are worrying about the environment, the governance, and the social. These are all things are related, and we are here because of a series of events that has brought us to the conclusion that we must change the way we conduct our business, the way we do trade, the way we consume. And so this linear economy that extract from nature passes into manufacture, first manufacture, second manufacture, third manufacture, and then puts a product in the market, and then half of the product ends up in the landfill, ends up in the water, ends up plastic floating in the ocean, or as gas emissions in the atmosphere, makes that we are drowning in waste. And it's everywhere, in the water, in the air, in the soil. And so we have to change this because it's not sustainable, because our GDP, whether it is the municipal GDP, the regional GDP, the provincial GDP, the federal GDP, all of that is based on nature. GDP, if you look into what makes for GDP, you will see that an economy like Canada, for example, is based on natural resources. Well, natural resources are nature, are either renewable or non-renewable. If we are using non-renewable, well, every oil that we export, every metal that we export, that's it, it's gone, never come back. It was paid at a given period, at a specific moment. Maybe there was an economy that trickled down, maybe there was not an economy that trickled down, but it's gone. So it is not sustainable. Forests, the same thing. We have been cutting clear cuts of forests without thinking that we were needing to think in future generations, like we were future generations from our grandparents, as our grandchildren are future generations of us. So GDP is based on natural resources, biodiversity, and ecological services. I come from Quebec. Ecological services makes that 99% of hydroelectricity comes from hydropower, from the big mega rivers that we have in Quebec. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have the rivers, we didn't have hydroelectricity. Biodiversity, again, I live in Quebec. We have maple syrup in the market that holds 90% of maple syrup exportation is Quebec. So if something happened to the maple tree, well, something happened to the whole industry of maple syrup. Just to give you an idea, a can of maple syrup can be sold at 55 grams, half a liter in Japan. Now, I come from Peru. I was born in Peru. We have 5,000 types of potato. In Canada, we receive 4 or 5 types of potato. So nature is the basis for our GDP because it's in the form of natural resources, biodiversity, and ecological services. Now, science are unequivocal. They say greenhouse gases produced by combustion of fossil fuels are creating this greenhouse gas effect and warming the whole planet. And I was in NATO parliamentarians over the last weekend, and I heard how the Arctic is changing, warming 5 to 7 times faster than the meridional Canada. In Canada, we are warming 2 times faster than the rest of the world, than the average in the world. So the science has told us what is the cause, and that technicians, the engineers, the people that develop new technologies have told us that we can get renewable energy from solar, biomass, nuclear, wind, maritime, aeolian, waves. So it's up to us now to say, well, when the first revolution said we were changing in forms of energy, it was not because we got tired or there was not a natural resources to change, but it was because it was more efficient, it was cheaper, it was cleaner. And so civilization passed to or leave the Stone Age, not because of lack of stones, but because we found better ways, better forms, cheaper, safer, cleaner, efficient forms. And today we have that. If you ask Canadians about how much we should do for climate change or for pollution in general, and you will see that between 70%, 80%, even 90%, depending on the places that you ask, people say we should be doing a lot more. So the citizens are pushing for that. Now, what is lacking is a political will and the key catalyzed power of the financial sector. So the financial sector, we have to talk about responsible corporations. We have to talk about, responsible shareholders. But we forget that we are all the same. We are citizens. We wear different hats at the same time. We are all parents. We are all sisters. We have children. So we have to be more than responsible. We have to be sustainable and we have to care. So the government has put many legislations, maybe this government more than the previous one. So we have the impact assessment, we have the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, we have the Net Zero 2050, but we need more. We need something stronger than the ESG, because it's not only reporting, it's not only disclosing that there is a climate risk or a nature risk or biodiversity risk. Risk is like a diagnostic. It's just saying, oh, you have cancer. So what? So you have to think on the solutions. You have to think in what we need to do to change that. So in this case, for climate change is turning into renewable energy. So we have to align our finance sector with our climate commitments. So we have legislation, Net Zero 2050, but are we going to wait until 49 to drop the emissions? No, this is supposed to be a marathon. The transition was supposed to start 30 years ago. We didn't. And so every day that passes and that we don't shift, it's turned into a sprint. And at the point, as it's happening already, because extreme weather events are happening everywhere in Canada at cost very high. I don't know, Jasper, forest fire is already costing 1 billion, and per year we are 2-3 billion, and last year is going to be 7 billion. This year is going to be 7 billion. So from where are we going to get this money? And I think we should start by applying the polluter pay principle that it's in every single legislation around the world, but unfortunately it's not implemented. So I will be very happy to answer any question if there is. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, thank you for reminding me that we are open to questions and answers, of course, for our participants. If you are able to share your questions, we will address them later. All right. All right. So let's jump in with Eduardo. Eduardo, could you please touch on why social responsibility is such a vital component of ESG?
Yes, of course. And let me also make the connection with what Murray and Rosa already mentioned. Because, coming back to what Murray explained about what is ESG and how this concept, evolves, I think it's important to consider that maybe in the last 3-4 years, it seems that the E of ESG is more relevant than the S and the G. And of course, as Rosa mentioned, the environmental side and all the challenges that we are facing all around the world, because Rosa, you mentioned what's happening in Canada, but we have so many examples, sadly, in Latin America of, physical climate change happening, extreme events that are impacting a lot of communities, and it's showcasing that we are living now with this issue. And so again, it seems sometimes that the E is more important than the S and the G, but in reality, and especially in emerging markets like all the Latin American countries, the S is vital, and we need to find ways to continue finding the approach so we can, for example, move forward to an economy that is not only extractive, that we move forward to a circular economy, but at the same time that we can continue promoting growth in our economies, because we need to live from poverty, a lot of people, millions of people. And so the social side is quite relevant. And if you have a conversation, let me give you an example. We are at Deloitte, we are advising one of the biggest financial groups in Peru on, upgrading their sustainability strategy. And so we have a conversation with the C-level team, and the CEO mentioned to us, my biggest concern is the social issues. We are seeing all the time all the KPIs that give us an idea of a lot of the social challenges that we face. So the CEO was telling us, I'm thinking every week, I'm thinking how my company can do something to try to change, like the poverty rate level, or the financial inclusion levels, or educational level, how we can get more people educated. So again, I think the environmental side is very important, very important. And again, we are in Latin America, we are seeing the effects of climate change. But on the social side, I think if you have a conversation about ESG with a company in Latin America, it will be in a way easier to convince them that they need to do something on the social responsibility side, because they are, experiencing all the, or they are living, with all the social challenges that we face. So, for example, topics like how to work with their own people to develop talent, or to promote labor rights, or develop or building better community relationship with the stakeholders that are near to their operations. Those are things that I think companies now in Latin America are seeing, that this is, like, as Murray mentioned, is part of the business. If, for example, let's continue with the Peruvian case. If a mining company in Peru is not developing a very, a good strategy on how to manage their relationship with their communities surrounding their mining operations, that's going to affect business, because the communities are going to do things that are not going to be good for the company, or because maybe some of the talent that the company is, having for their operation is coming from those communities. So yeah, I think there is plenty of examples, Sergio, on why the S on ESG, especially in Latin America, is very, very important.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And Eduardo, again with you. Now we're jumping to the G, in this case, governance factors. And when it comes to governance, what frameworks and practices should organizations prioritize in order to ensure transparency and accountability? And how does the leadership play a role in embedding ESG principles into corporate culture and decision making?
Yeah, let me to answer that question, let me give you an example. So as I mentioned, I work for Deloitte, but from 2018 through 2023, I have the opportunity to work for an organization that is called PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment. So what Murray mentioned at the beginning, that part of what is driving ESG is connected with the financial sector. I have the chance in my previous role to work with many asset owners and asset managers in Latin America to help them, to guide them on how to incorporate ESG into their investment process. And so I remember very well having a conversation with an asset manager based in Mexico, like 6-7 years ago, and he was mentioning to me, because we were talking about the ESG, and we were like having this conversation, okay, which letter is more important, the E, the S, or the G? And so I remember very well he was telling me, Eduardo, the most important letter is the G, especially in Latin America, because if you don't have the G, the E and the S is not going to happen. It's not going to happen, because if you don't have like a C-level that really understand the importance of environmental topics, the importance of social topics, why a organization should be, managing not only their KPIs related with business, but also KPIs that are also related with business, but are
It seems Eduardo got frozen.
there is this concept of greenwashing, and that's a reality. You have companies saying, environmental topics are very important. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like, for example, what Rosa mentioned, we are going to be net zero. When? In 2050. Okay, what are you going to do in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Because 2050, it's okay. It's good that you are putting yourself a goal in the long term, but if you're not going to change your business, or you're not going to do something about the current trend of environmental impacts that your company is creating right now, it's greenwashing. You're not changing really things. So when you don't have like a governance framework that really understand these topics and really, I will say, challenge the organization to really work on these topics in a strategic way. That's why I remember this conversation about why the G is so relevant in emerging markets, especially in Latin America. And from my experience, I'm seeing this all the time. So when, for example, we are advising a client and the sponsor of the project is somebody that is in the middle management, yeah, we advise the company and some things happen, but you feel that this is not going to create like a lasting impact in the organization. When you have a project where the sponsor is the CFO or the CEO, or this is like something that comes from the board, it's completely different. And the results of your project, whatever it is, like supporting a company on like developing a corporate sustainability, a corporate social plan, or doing like a climate change assessment, whatever it is on the ESG landscape, when the CEO, the CFO, or the board is the one that is getting the results, you have the feeling that something is going to happen, something is going to change in the organization. So I will say, coming back to your question, that yeah, the best governance framework is having the C-level and the board really committed and on board and understanding the importance of, from their roles, motivating that the company work on ESG.
All right. Thank you. Murray, going back with you, we were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Could you please share with us some best practices on implementing these initiatives?
Specifically on diversity or specifically on social?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I specific examples. I think in terms of operational and governance, I'd just like to first maybe echo what Eduardo was just saying. Something about sort of the management side of things, and this kind of leads into the whole diversity question, where Eduardo was talking about the significance of having senior management support. I couldn't agree more strongly. The projects that I've worked on in Peru back in the 90s, in Canada in the 2000s, and more abroad since then. A key factor in all those projects, I won't say success, but moving towards success, was the fact that the senior manager on the site was fully committed to the ES agenda, and wanted to be involved in that. And to be examples, and this kind of comes into the sort of the diversity area and diversity questions, is that he wanted to make sure he had staff on his working on his HSES, as I've said earlier, areas, who were representative or who could understand the local cultures where you're working. So working in Peru, it was always important that most of our staff, almost all of our staff, were Peruvian. They weren't international staff. It was important that we had access to and representation from particularly indigenous peoples, who were our main clients in that particular, or the mainly impacted communities in that particular project. Similarly, in Canada, we had a project where, again, working with indigenous people and vulnerable peoples, we ensured that we had people on our staff who could deal with these subjects, and it basically informed people like myself and like my manager, who were also always expats in both locations, properly as to how we should be dealing with the business. So I think from that point of view, the staffing is important as well. I mean, not to mention that resources are also needed. You have to have fundamental resources in the company, which comes back to the level of commitment from your senior management that they are going to fund the things that are necessary. Meetings, workshops, travel, bringing NGOs together, bringing indigenous people together, people who require some financial support to make things happen on an as needed and where needed basis from that point of view. So I think that's another significant aspect to it, and making these things work.
Right. Great. Thank you, Murray. Well, and thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and experience with us. Well, we are now open the floor for discussion. Sandra will share some questions from our audience related to ESG. Sandra?
Thank you, Sergio. So the first question is for Senator Galvez. Regarding environmental factors, what practical steps can small and medium businesses take to integrate renewable energy into their operations without significantly increased costs?
Thank you for the question. Well, I hope you realize that when we talk about fossil fuels, we're not talking about a free market, because governments inject millions and billions of dollars in subsidies. So it is very difficult to compete with fossil fuels while governments are injecting such huge amounts of subsidies. Nevertheless, solar, wind, biomass, hydro, and waves and tides have demonstrated that they are in free fall as cost is getting very much reduced and very competitive. That's one point. Another point is that there comes so many advantages, not only economic because of the prices that is going down, but it's also because it's locally produced. You don't have to worry anymore about the source, looking into all these geopolitics of from where this oil, coal, carbon is coming. Also remember that the free oil and the easy extractable oil is less and less available in the world. We are going into unconventional oils, which is, for example, the oil sands from Canada, or the heavy oil from Venezuela, or the back-end oil from fracking in US. These are very, very expensive oils that needs a lot of energy to be extracted. So there is this distortion of the market. And I think that when businesses start using local renewable energy, they start very soon realizing that, all these other stuff about how the subsidies will impact my business, my supply chain, disappear, because everything starts being local. Many people ask me about Quebec and its hydroelectricity, and I use it a lot to present this example, because a lot of the development of Quebec, has been due, or it has been possible because of the hydroelectricity that we have and that we can export to Ontario, or we can export to New England. So the other thing too is that if you compare the workforce needed for oil operation, producing electricity from oil, and the one being produced by renewables, is much simpler. In fact, you just have to compare fossil fuel combustion engine with an electrical engine, and you will see that the parts are much more smaller. So of course, workers needed to adapt. Yes, and I do remember in Quebec buying the first Prius in Quebec and having to go only to Toyota to repair it. But that in 3 years, every Canadian Tire was repairing also hybrid cars. So, things change fast, and the ones that are progressive, the ones that are thinking in the future, are going to be compensated. And the ones that are still with the all business as usual, I think they are going to regret extending this period.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. There's another question probably for Senator Galvez again. How much would you say is the average percentage of ESG in the annual budget of big companies in Canada,
Ooh.
in Peru, or maybe Eduardo?
Very good question. I don't think there is data showing that much, but if there, it's very low. We need to accelerate the pace at which we take care of this. Not only reporting, I want to emphasize the thing because I talk a lot with people in finances, and they are very driven by thinking that reporting is going to push people. Reporting. What actually, in my experience, I have seen what motivates people are the results, are to see that there is less corruption, to see that there is more ethics in the governance, to see that the company becomes more efficient because governance is better, to see that the environment, the social environment in the workplace is better, to see that the classes of the working classes in the institution are not very the inequalities is not exaggerated when these things are explained. Why some CEOs get this bonus given on this performance, and in the environment, of course, when pollution is reduced, when the circularity index indicates that the whole chain has been reduced and it's more efficient because we are wasting less and also paying less in pollution, in remediating pollution. So I want to put the emphasis on the results and not on the reporting of whatever the risk, because the vision of the finance sector is very much into the, if it's risk, we have to reduce it, no matter how. Instead of what is the good thing that comes out of worrying about the environment, less pollution, more efficiency. We will get our natural resources will stay longer with us because we, for example, I can give you an example. Steel, we throw tons of steel into the landfills, and I can tell you because I have designed landfills places. But now we have, and I'm going to give another example in Quebec, we have a company that produces steel in Quebec that is becoming a major steel recycler in the world. So they are not only not needing anymore to look into extracting more natural resources from Quebec to do the steel, but they are increasing the circularity and producing less and recycling more. So I think that there is a lot of space to move from the stick, because the fear of the risk, to more the carrot, and see what is not only money, but there are important benefits, environmental, social, and governance. Sorry, I took too long.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Is there any final one, Sandra?
No, we only have 3 options, so.
All right, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, we're reaching the closing remarks. So that's today we explore the essence of ESG. Well, highlighting ESG through environmental, social, and governance perspective, and I can rescue a few takeaways. Like the first one is ESG is not only about compliance. I think it's creating a long-term value for stakeholders, building resilience, and driving innovation across industries. Also, businesses can significantly impact climate change by adopting measured strategies to reduce their carbon footprint. Also, incorporating the diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization leads to a stronger and more dynamic teams to better decision making. Transparency, of course, and accountability are not negotiable for fostering and trust with investors, customers, and stakeholders. A strong leadership is essential to embed ESG, something that it resonated a lot. And ESG challenges requires collaboration across sectors, industries, and also sharing best practices and leveraging collaborative expertise and critical for achieving meaningful progress. So, and basically assess the current ESG strategies and identify gaps, establish measured goals and environmental, social, and governance efforts, engage leadership and employees, and ESG education and training. So finally, I want to thank you, all of you, for their valuable insights, and to all our participants for your engagement in this event. So we will continue collaborating to unlock the potential of ESG for a sustainable future. This is just the start. At the PCCC, we plan to run more sessions like this. So please hear about this and looking forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sandra.
Thank you.